Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Noe with SpeakEasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners. It is June, episode 35. I have an awesome guest that I've been waiting to have on. Erich Kurschat is with me for episode 35. We have so much to get into, but Erich, welcome to SpeakEasy HR, my friend.
Good afternoon, David. This has been a long time coming, and that intro was slick.
Yeah,
I liked it.
Yeah,
nicely done.
Try to make it a little different for every episode to an extent, but
yeah,
it's good. So welcome. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So for those of you who are watching live throughout this, obviously we want to hear some engagement questions with you as you are thinking about them. Somebody else watching might have the same question. So use the chat section. We will have it open, but definitely want to go through a little bit about your background. But for those of you who are new to SpeakEasy HR, welcome. I am David Noe, the host, producer, the editor of this podcast that I started last summer, almost a year now. I've been doing this, and there is a weekly blog out on the website, so SpeakEasyHR.com. This week's blog is about integrity, so go check that out. And so before we get into the topic, Erich, if you want to just kind of tell the folks a little bit about your background, and I know you're in the Midwestern Chicago area, so you are Central Time, and obviously Monday afternoons, a lot of people are busy, so hopefully we get some people watching live. But for those who do not know Erich Kurschat, if you want to just tell us about yourself and a little bit about your background.
I am happy to. Most importantly, I'm a father, and a relatively new father. We have a 3-year-old and two twins. So of course there are two, but identical twins, all daughters. And that is these days what defines me more than just about anything else. So I want to share that.
Definitely
share that right off the bat. Thank you. And that keeps me plenty busy. But beyond that, I'm the owner of Harmony Insights, so it's a company that helps me help others leverage the DISC and 5 behaviors assessments and tools related to those. Also the founder of HRHotSeat, which is an inclusive mastermind community. I loved in your how you just introduced things. You said that you may have a question that others may have. And turns out that is the foundation of HRHotSeat, is coming together with like-minded HR professionals to tackle common challenges. So I thought that was a great segue for that intro piece. But yeah, these days it's all about the babies.
Yeah, hopefully you're getting some sleep. I know they are newer. They're not one yet, right? The
twins, yeah.
They're still young. So hopefully you are getting some much needed.
They're champion sleepers. It's the daytime that I could use help with. So if anybody out there has tips and tricks for me, I'd love to hear them.
Are they in a good schedule these days? Do they have a good sleeping pattern and routine?
Yes, I would never wish for premature babies. Ours were by about 8 weeks. And that meant that they spent the first month of their lives in the special care nursery at Elmhurst Hospital here in the western suburbs of Chicago. And the nurses there, who are just absolutely phenomenal, kind of trained them in the sense that when they came to us a month later, they were already sleeping fairly well in ways that our first daughter, our toddler now, wasn't, because my wife and I were responsible for making that happen. So I think they came to us already sleeping very well, and we've had other challenges to contend with along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, there's always pros and cons. I've got, my oldest is 15, my middle son is almost 13. So every age group, you kind of like, oh, it's been great when they're not, not wearing diapers anymore. And then it's like, oh, now they're driving, and it's a whole nother, situation that it's like, it's great because they can obviously drive themselves places, but it goes fast, man. It just goes so fast. So definitely enjoy every stage of their early development, because it's exciting. And I still have nieces and nephews that are younger, baby wise. So definitely get to be around younger kids and enjoy the younger kids running around so we're gonna play the envelope icebreaker game. I don't know if you are ready for that or not. It's more of a fun icebreaker game that I've had all this season. The same questions. I'm thinking of changing them up for season 2 in July, but 15 questions, Eric. It is not anything that you have to really think about, but as I play the intro, just think of a number 1 through 15, and then I'll let you pick the question, and we'll go from there. Hold on one second. I think it played. I don't know. It was delayed on my part, but maybe it played. So 1 through 15, you get to pick the number.
Well, I just mentioned having 3 daughters, so let's go with number 3.
Number 3 it is. All right. We got number 3 for Eric, and it is, what was your first job that you earned a paycheck with taxes deducted?
I love it, because we all know that as a kid, there are plenty of jobs you have where you don't have to worry about taxes. I remember cutting so many lawns and helping out in so many other ways. For me, it was likely as a dishwasher at a restaurant. Early on, I was drawn to food service hospitality for whatever reason, which is kind of foreshadowing for the 16 years I spent in food service hospitality post-college. But I walked into a restaurant and learned pretty quickly that my comfort zone was going to be at the dishwasher. And so I washed dishes professionally in any number of restaurants as a child. Well, child, relatively speaking.
Yeah. I feel like everybody, I don't know. I've worked at a few restaurants, and I feel like everybody needs to experience it once, to just work in a restaurant and work with the public and work with people that come in to, get food. And it just, I don't know. I think that is such an important industry to at least get a job in at some point. My 15-year-old started his own company. He is cleaning garbage cans with a pressure washer, and him and his buddy are just going around neighborhoods, and they just started a couple weeks ago. So they're getting into it. It's pretty fun to see.
I love it. Send them out here to the western burbs of Chicago. I could use that service.
It's definitely worth the price that they pay. They're giving a friends and family discount right now. So it's like $15-$20, and they're staying busy. So, all right. One more question out of number 3 is gone. So one more.
All right. 7 was always a number that I was focused on growing up in sports and otherwise. So let's go with 7.
7 it is. All right. This might be one of my favorites. All right. When you were in grade school, Eric, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Excellent question. I early on, one of my earliest memories of having any sort of professional aspiration was to be an author. They in many schools, they have children writing books and participating in young authors conferences, and I sort of use books with quotation marks there, but I remember binding my first book with some fabric cover thinking, this is a thing, like I can make stuff up, and it ends up on paper. And I remember being really proud of that and thinking maybe one day I'll write. And it's turned out that I don't do a ton of writing, but I think that spirit of what's possible has remained with me in some fun ways. Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing that. So we are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. So if you are watching, I am looking, and there are some people watching live. So thanks for joining and spending a little bit of your Monday with Eric and I. And we're going to get into his topic. But if you do have a question, throw it in the chat. Throw where you're watching in there. Would love to hear where you are watching as well. So if you know myself or Eric, would love to hear from you. But before we get into your topic, Eric, quickly, just a couple of words from our presenting sponsor, and then we're going to get into your topic, which I cannot wait to, because it is well beyond just something in HR. It's for, I feel like everybody in the workplace right now can learn from this topic. So give me just about a minute, and then we will start with your topic here.
Finding a new employee takes time and money. For one position on a single job board, you could easily spend a minimum of $5 to $10 a day advertising a job post. It's worth noting that the average time it takes to hire a new employee is 36 days. However, it can take longer than that. You could find yourself paying hundreds of dollars a month for a single job board. And if you're using multiple job boards for multiple positions, this could add up to thousands of dollars a month. There is a much simpler and more affordable way of finding the right candidate. At Payroll Partners, we offer an applicant tracking system to help manage your hiring process. Our ATS is customizable, allowing you to decide which days you want to run the job and when to close it so you don't break the bank. And this feature lets you e-blast your network, posting jobs on multiple boards at once, all managed in one location. Payroll Partners, elevating your payroll and HR experience.
So if you are in the world of payroll technology for your job and you have to figure out what technology to use, we are here for you and have amazing service, can work and deal with businesses really anywhere in the country. So if you are in Chicago, Ohio, Kentucky, California, look us up, payrollpartners.net, and would love to work with you and get you some quotes and see how we can help you streamline all of the fun in the world of payroll and HR technology these days. So, all right. So Erich, when I came to you, we got connected a while back, and obviously, you know, some of the day-to-day family life and stuff kind of pushed our episode to today in June. And so we've been talking about your episode and what you're bringing to the podcast. And so you had brought up value of diverse communication styles on a team.
Welcome to This Meeting Should Have Been a Podcast, where we take on workplace issues from a skewed angle.
No corporate buzzwords, you quiet quitters.
And no strategic KPIs or dashboards.
Get out of here. We're talking company culture, leadership, workplace.
Guests who've lived through the chaos.
So forget those slide decks. We're candid, clever, hopefully useful.
We'll see you outside the boardroom. Go Lakers.
Don't wear that. Get out. Don't even wear that hat.
And so I thought that was really an intriguing topic, and I know it fits with some of the work that you do in with Harmony Insights, and so I really want to hear more. Kind of what led you to start with that topic and bring that to the show today?
I think, well, I know, when I think about the through line, what are the things that really drive the work that I do and how I feel I can serve others, individuals and teams alike? So much of that comes down to effective communication. It's something that I've struggled with, over time, personally and professionally. You can ask my wife; she will agree to that I've struggled with effective communication. You could probably ask previous bosses and team members, and I just think that it's so central to so much of who we are and what we accomplish in life, both personally and professionally. So it's one thing to be able to help others communicate, maybe sharing some of the pitfalls and challenges that I've faced, but communicate in a way that maybe for the first time in your life you were embracing diverse communication styles instead of keeping them at an arm's length, which I think we tend to do naturally. So it's an attempt to help people communicate, but then also recognize that if left to our own devices, we may keep diverse communication styles in particular at an arm's length rather than embrace those, leverage them, celebrate them, and then experience greater success both individually and as an organization.
Yeah. So why do you think that diverse communication styles really matter in the workplace? And what's at risk when they're really ignored?
So without going into the studies and the literature, I think naturally we gravitate toward people who are like us. Sometimes they look like us, sometimes they talk like us, sometimes they value what we value. And I don't think anyone's to blame for that. I think that's just kind of naturally how things are. I'm sure there's something evolutionary in there. What that means then is that you end up with a team, a leadership team or a community that's kind of homogeneous or homogenous. I always forget how that's supposed to be pronounced, but one of those two things. And then, without going on too much of a tangent, those of us in HR with an HR background are kind of guilty of this as well. We say, David, you've been so great at this organization. We want to dangle this referral bonus in front of you to bring in friends and family members that we assume are going to be just as great as you are. But if you're bringing in folks that look and talk and value, the things that you do, then suddenly we end up in this culture that is maybe less diverse than it otherwise could be. And so part of, I think, what I'm wanting to do with the work that I do in conversations like this is to challenge that natural disposition to say, what if instead we recognize that this is our natural tendency, not necessarily fight against it. There's still value in it, but be even more intentional then about embracing people of diverse backgrounds, however you define it. And we can, define diversity in so many different ways. And especially now, I think with it being in the headlines, the way that DEI happens to be, I think it's on all of us to be intentional about making space for diverse perspectives, backgrounds, experiences, etc.
Absolutely. So I'm with Erich Kurschat, founder of Harmony Insights and HRHotSeat. The live chat is open. If you are watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn, feel free to throw in a question because someone else might have the same question on their mind and they may just not put it in the chat. So Erich, can you share an example of how different communication styles really strengthened or strained a team dynamic you've experienced?
Yeah, and I can, from my own experience, actually, I spent, we were talking earlier about food service hospitality, and I spent 16 years working for a company in that space. And, we had chefs who were often stereotypically kind of details oriented and, doing sort of things by the book because it had to be replicated and you had to guarantee quality, et cetera. And so having sort of a system in place was the best way to guarantee that quality. And we also had sales folks and customer service folks who would show up to a chef and say, we need to add a special menu item, or we need to make an adjustment here and an adjustment there. And those were such different personality styles. One is saying, no, this needs to be replicatable, if that's a word, to guarantee quality, with the other saying, we need to depart from that system and that consistency in order to better serve an individual. And of course, if you don't figure out how to dance with that, then you're met sort of head to head. And the second, example that comes to mind is from my own experience. I remember sitting down with one of our executive leaders who was really important to the organization and to me and my own success. And we were having just sort of a casual lunch together. And he very openly and honestly said to me, and very directly, given his own style, Erich, given your sort of detail orientation, and I'm paraphrasing here, whenever I get an email from you, I hover over the delete button before I even read the email. And that was sort of a wake-up call for me to recognize that something that I thought was so valuable, which is bringing this information, bringing this detail to people who are a little bit more direct and concise in their communication style, it was just too much. And if I didn't do something about that, I wouldn't excel and thrive professionally in ways that I could otherwise.
Wow. That's very interesting. So how can leaders identify and embrace the unique communication preferences with their team members?
I think number one is recognizing that there are diverse communication preferences. It's so easy, I think, to assume that everybody communicates how I do and everyone needs the same things that I need and they're motivated in the same ways with the same fears. And so we end up, treating others the way that we would want to be treated. And there's value in that golden rule. I'm not saying to disregard it entirely. Morally and ethically, it makes total sense. But I think it's the point at which we recognize that there may be greater value at times in treating others the way that they want to be treated, that suddenly open up possibility. Organizations become more innovative. Leaders become more effective. Individual contributors become more productive. And so getting to the point that, number one, you recognize that you have diverse needs on your team. And then two, caring enough and being curious enough to want to better understand those and meet those needs. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a skill that can be built, but geez, the teams and organizations that really embrace and leverage diversity of thought, cognitive diversity, they are operating on an entirely different level as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So I have, and a lot of people have gone through different ways of working over the last 5+ years, remote, hybrid, in office, right? It's all been different and it's continuing to change. And I feel like more companies are bringing people back into the office or having them come in for part of the week and not be fully remote. So, in remote and hybrid teams, how do communication differences become more visible or more misunderstood, you think?
I love this question. I do one of the conference sessions. I speak publicly in various ways, and I have a couple of conference sessions that I especially enjoy. And one of them is called You're on Mute, Why You're Not Being Heard and What to Do About It. And in that conversation, I kind of harken back to the pandemic where suddenly we were all masked, or many of us were masked. And, I think the stats are that up to 93% of the meaning of what you have to say comes through in your nonverbal communication. And as little as 7% can be in your verbal communication. We spend all of our time picking our words wisely without realizing that such a percentage goes into how we use those words, and our gestures, and even how we dress is considered nonverbal communication. Suddenly, many of us are masked, or we are showing up on Zoom off camera, and you're losing so much information that helps you really understand what's behind people are saying. I mean, you could be nodding your head. I'm not saying this is the case now, but you could be nodding your head in agreement. But there may be a look on your face that tells me David's kind of skeptical, Right. But I'm only going to pick that up if I can see your face. Now, if you're behind a mask, which I, by the way, was very pro-mask and remain so, or, you've turned off your video, now suddenly we're having what amounts to a phone call, and you've lost so much of that information that helps me connect meaningfully and productively with you. So if we consider no longer being face-to-face next to a water cooler, the proverbial water cooler, and instead we're jumping on Teams, or we're jumping into Slack or one of these other platforms, we have to be that much more, I think, intentional, and I would argue that much more curious and willing to build this skill of people reading, I'll call it people reading, that allows us to recognize what people need from us and be able to respond accordingly to those needs.
Right. So you work with a lot of different assessments, and I think in your experience, I think DISC is one that you enjoy, and I think you call yourself a DISC nerd.
I do.
So I think I've gone through the DISC assessment several times in different companies, and it's similar. It I think is a really good exercise that if companies haven't done it and are thinking of trying to figure out the right assessment, there's so many out there. I haven't used them all. You probably have used more than I have, but I think if somebody is trying to communicate better with their team and may not know where to turn and figure out the right approach to it, what would you tell them? What kind of advice would you maybe give them, and how to walk through that process of figuring out what the right one is for them, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And even though I am a self-described DISC nerd, I'll be the first to admit that it is not a one-size-fits-all. So if you come to me with an objective or a goal that is not suitable for DISC, I'll be the first to tell you, and then I will tell you what would be more suitable. And I've said, even in my facilitations, I facilitate DISC workshops all the time, I say that if there's a really attractive Facebook quiz that you want to use, maybe people want to find out what Friends character they are, or Game of Thrones, as long as you don't expect it to be scientifically valid and reliable, and it's because odds are it's not going to be, that's okay. If it encourages and inspires meaningful dialogue between members of a team, I say use it. But if you're looking for something to be both valid and reliable, you might want to move in a slightly different direction. So when I'm talking to new clients, I ask a few questions, but number one is, are you looking for something? Well, what are you looking to achieve? What is your goal? What is your objective? And if they start talking along the lines of, well, we want to make sure that we have the right people in the right seats, that we're able to predict performance in a role, I say, unfortunately, that's not DISC. There are other assessments out there like PXT Select, which is also from Wiley, who I'm an authorized publisher for, or authorized partner. There's Predictive Index. those can predict performance in a role. If you're talking about DISC, you're talking about an assessment that won't predict performance, but instead will help you better understand your natural preferences and tendencies in the workplace. So if your goal as a talent development professional, as a department head, as a CEO is to help your team better understand themselves, and I would argue, at times even more valuably, strengthen relationships with other stakeholders, both internal and external. DISC is something that does that so well, which is why it is such a popular workplace assessment.
Yeah. So let's shift gears to emotional intelligence, because I hear a lot about that. And it seems like I don't go a week without somebody bringing up emotional intelligence. So what role does that play in navigating and adapting to various communication styles?
And it is something that you hear often. And there is in the sort of the everything DISC suite of assessments, there's one called Agile EQ. So emotional intelligence is very much baked into the DISC model as well. And one of the definitions, at least that I work with for emotional intelligence, has to do with recognizing and responding effectively to the social and emotional needs of a situation. And that really is two parts. And so I've known people that have said, I am emotionally intelligent. I can recognize that this is a need of yours. And I say, okay, that's part one of the puzzle. Yeah. Part two then, and I would argue maybe the harder part at times, is then responding effectively. So you may be very tuned into other people's feelings and emotions and really pick up on nuances and subtleties. But if you then lack the ability then to respond appropriately to those needs, well, I'm not sure that is, sort of the full broad definition of emotional intelligence. And so I think whenever two people are together in the same space, you're bound to have conflict, and being able to approach that conflict with some level of emotional intelligence will allow you to be more connected, more productive, certainly more marketable as an individual to potential employers than you might otherwise be. The hard part is proving that emotional intelligence, is quantifying it and putting it on a resume. That's hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. For those on LinkedIn or YouTube, we are live. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. I have several more to go through with Erich, but would love to hear from somebody in the audience. If you have a question that's on your mind, put it in the chat and we will take a look at it. So Erich, what's one communication style that's often undervalued in teams, and why is it critical to recognize it?
You are just sort of solid with these questions that you've prepared. The one way to answer this is to say the most undervalued communication style is the one that is least represented on a team. So regardless of the team, it's the style that is not there. And I can't help but think in terms of DISC styles. You have a D style, which is more direct. I is kind of influential and social and persuasive. The S steadiness style is kind of systematic and people focused, but a little bit more laid back, wanting to be of value to others. And then you have the C or conscientiousness style, which is all about getting things right and being analytical and crossing T's and dotting I's. And you probably, as I have been on teams where some of those styles are very well represented and others where they're not. So answer number one is whichever style is least represented is most likely going to be the most valuable to a team. The second one is to say that generally, I would argue, and I don't know if you would agree with this. I'd love to know if you do or don't, that the sort of the dominant and influencing styles are often more valued in our culture. And when I say ours, I would say sort of the U.S. North American culture, that CEOs that are celebrated and show up in headlines, et cetera, those that are making bold moves and taking quick action and dreaming about what's possible and kind of making all of that happen pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And if we can agree to that to some extent, and I always hate to generalize because there are always exceptions to any rule, those S or C styles, the people who are a little bit more moderately paced, that are focused on quality and dependability and preferring to have a system in place and knowing that you've kind of thought through, maybe not every possible route, but many of them to anticipate obstacles, for example, or to guarantee success. I think in a lot of the work that I've done, that those styles can be naturally undervalued. And I would argue that giving those folks a voice, inviting them into the conversation, not being so quick to overlook their contributions, would really be of value to organizations and teams and leaders who are moving at a quicker pace, and are hesitant to slow down a bit to consider some things that they might not otherwise. Just as easily as that, those more moderately paced styles have something to learn from styles that are a bit more actively paced. It does go both ways.
Right. Yeah, I think my feedback to that would be, if I'm looking at a group of managers, they are not all going to be the same DISC profile. You know, they should have the same similarities when it comes to working, you know, alongside their coworkers and who they're managing. I think a lot of people just assume that managers are those dominant, you know, direct people. And, you know, there might be some that way, but if your team does not respond well to that kind of communication style, then if you are a D, then you probably have to shift the way that you talk to your team to really make it an effective and successful team. So I look at, you know, a group of individuals who are not in a managerial role, that they want to be a manager one day and obviously have the responsibility of leading people. You know, I'm here to say you don't have to be a D to be a manager or a leader or an influencer. You know, it really will depend on how you can, I guess, acclimate to the environment, in the industry you're in the job you're in the company, the organization. All of that plays a factor. You know, your DISC profile is just somewhat of a DNA that can help you and help others understand how to communicate better with you, right? So, you know, I think for people that don't know, you know, what their DISC profile is, you know, I think if you look at the sales team, most people on a sales team are going to be a similar DISC profile. You know what I mean? Like they are influencing and talking to people that are trying to get their business. So it really is fascinating. And I think some of the best leaders and some of the best managers out there are more the ones that can relate better to their team and feel like they are going to get the most out of their team, even on their bad days, you know.
And to be clear, it doesn't mean that they have to share. And I know you're not saying this or implying this, but it doesn't even mean that they have to share a communication style, you know, that they have to be similar in the sense that they value the same things. Right. The most effective leaders that I've worked with are those that recognize opportunities to adapt whatever comes naturally to them. You know, embrace what comes naturally and say, this is kind of my comfort zone, if you want to call it that, but recognize opportunities to adapt and then be able to do so. You know, so I step into a conversation with you and maybe I am, you know, hypothetically a little bit more detail oriented. If you're more big picture focused, I don't necessarily want to make you speak my language. I want to speak yours to communicate respectfully with you so that you walk away saying, that was a great conversation with Erich, simply because I respected how you're showing up and, you know, the language that is most meaningful and productive for you rather than making you speak mine. And it's doable. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a skill that can be developed. But once you get to that point, I think your experience of what it means to communicate with others, either in or out of work, it just changes. It doesn't matter how old you are, or what your title is, or your tenure. You know, I have people of all ages and titles, etc., in my workshop, and people are having aha moments that can be, I hate to say this because it sounds so grandiose, it can be life changing. You know, if you really buy into this conversation.
I think your audio just changed a little bit. I couldn't hear the end of your comment there.
All right. Well, I appreciate you letting me know. If I'm back, there may have just been a quick glitch, but just mentioning that if you recognize the power of adapting, it can be life changing for some people who recognize that, oh, wait a minute, my way of communicating hasn't always worked. You know, it's actually been detrimental at times. Well, I need to do something. I can mitigate. I can get ahead of that in a way that allows me to be so much more effective in my professional role and connect so much more meaningfully throughout my life.
And as the board in the back here, it says champions adjust, y'all. That is so true. I mean, you've got to adjust. You've got to be able to adjust and really adapt to change. And the more you can do that, the more successful you'll be. Your background is awesome. I do want to point that out because that was on LinkedIn as we were promoting the episode, and you have the fun tools and whatever you use for that screen, the green screen or wherever you've got. So thanks for putting that up. It's fun to make that, and then I'm glad you're able to use that because you were the first to do that. So you're setting
absolutely. I'll wear that badge with pride. And I don't want it to be lost either. That is part of communication. That's part of how I've chosen to show up. And so I could have a Harmony Insights logo there, or an HRHotSeat logo, and be kind of self-promoting. And to me, it has a bigger impact, and hopefully, is appreciated by you in a different way that I would choose to show up with this background. And I'm not saying that everybody should go out and invest in this green screening ability to do something like this, but it was just one way that I could do something unexpected in this conversation to communicate respect to you and the brand that you're building. And I decided to go with it to see what would happen. And I'm glad you like it.
Speaking of brand, we had talked before we came on live, and I did bring this question up to Erich prior, so he knows that I was going to ask it. But personal brand statement, I think people that don't have a personal brand statement, I challenge you to think about that. And I made one about a month ago, and I put it up on the screen. So it's to create positive and meaningful experiences that inspire, uplift, and make a lasting impact on individuals. So in my line of work and what I do day to day, owning a business with my wife, running an HR department, doing this podcast, really any kind of individual on a daily basis that I'm interacting with, this is what I'm trying to achieve. So if you don't have one, I would strongly suggest trying to create one. And it can change, just like your DISC profile to some extent. But Erich, do you have one or something that you wanted to bring up as we talked about more of a brand for yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. And I should have a sort of a legitimate personal brand statement. And I don't know if what I'm about to share would qualify as such. Because I perceive a personal brand statement as being a little bit more central to just the value that I bring to the world at large. Mine is more focused, I think, on the business that I run and the work that I do. And it really is to help companies and consultants build both high-performing teams and revenue streams around the DISC and 5 behaviors of a team, 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, assessments and models. So I've used other versions of it along the way. And in the work that I've done as a career coach, I feel like it's valuable to reiterate that these things aren't set in stone and should evolve, just as we evolve. And so at times I've said, helping companies bring these things to life as a shared language. And that felt good for a while. And now I've landed somewhere a little bit different. So if I may add to, what you've already suggested, that as people identify their own personal brand statements, that they remain open to the fact that these things will change. And that's a good thing. It means we're continuing to evolve as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you are watching live on LinkedIn or YouTube, harmonyinsights.com is where you can go and check out more of Erich's work. I've got a QR code to make it even easier on the screen. So Erich, if a team is struggling with miscommunication, what's one step that they can take today to begin improving that?
So I could easily jump to things related to DISC or 5 behaviors, and again, in an effort to not be quite so self-promoting in this conversation, I want to consider the fact that teams are made up of individuals. And so it's easy to get lost in the team dynamic and think of, multiple people comprising this team and lose sight of the fact that a team is made up of individuals. And so I think at its roots, you need to encourage effective communication between individuals. And the way that I do that is simply, resources aside, assessments aside, encourage people to be curious and sit down with their colleagues and say something as simple as, are you getting what you need from me? I know about myself that I can be more direct at times. Is that an effective communication style for you? Well, the other person may say, yes, it's great. Let's continue on. The other person may say, honestly, I perceive that directness as kind of aggressive at times, and it's a bit off-putting. Or someone could say, I, as your supervisor, I bring a different style where it's important to me that you're getting your needs met, and so I'm always trying to invite you into the conversation, invite you to participate. Is that valuable to you? You could say yes, or you could say, you know what, I've always perceived that as kind of you not having an opinion of your own. And as my supervisor, I would love to know, what your standard is for me, or what your vision of success happens to look like. So I would love if you'd be more willing as my supervisor to share some of those things to help me do my best work. It doesn't have to involve the word DISC or 5 behaviors or anything that I work with, or any other model for that matter. And it's simply two people sitting down and being curious enough about one another to tease apart some of this cognitive diversity and have a meaningful dialogue that could have an immediate impact on things like engagement and turnover and some of those things in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's going to continue to be important as the next generation of the employee workforce comes in and we have people retiring. So, managers have a difficult job. And so I think HR's responsibility, in my role and everybody in some form of HR capacity is there to really help improve the skills of that team and that manager and that leadership team, and working with folks like yourself and Harmony Insights to really figure out the right way to make it an effective strategy, because you know what is going to be successful from in your experience. And so I think companies are needing to have people like yourself, and they may not know all the answers. So definitely suggest, if you are evaluating just as a whole your company, and maybe you do have a pulse on your communication preference as a company. If you don't, I would definitely send a survey, send a pulse survey out and ask people, how do you feel like we communicate as a company as a whole? How does your manager communicate? Find ways to improve. And if you don't know how to do it, check out Erich and Harmony Insights. I think you might have some of the answers for these individuals and these companies that may not know really the next step in figuring out how to make it better. So,
well, we've mentioned the word shared language, or the term shared language already, and that's as good a starting point as any, where if you're struggling to have this conversation internally within your organization, choosing whatever shared language really feels right to you allows you to begin having this vitally important conversation about how we do our best work and how we connect meaningfully with others. And I don't know that we've used the word culture too much, but culture is wrapped up in a lot of this, how we communicate or don't, and so in that pulse survey that you recommended, a question, something as simple as, do you feel heard by your manager? Do you feel like your contributions are valued on your team? Some people will have a visceral response to those questions, either good or bad, and whichever it is, you want to hear about that, so what to celebrate and where you might need some attention.
And there's not a one size fits all with that. I mean, our organization has 40 employees. We every 6 months try to get a good pulse on the environment, and so we're getting ready to do it next month. And I go back 6 months and see what we were told, what we've done to improve, and what we can do to move forward. So it really, you don't have to be a large organization to really get good feedback from your team. All it takes is asking the right questions and giving them a voice to really provide their feedback. So
anything else? What we've done to improve, like that's a big piece of this.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know if you've worked for any organizations or have heard of some that do engagement surveys and pulse surveys, and they sit on the responses, or they take some sort of, they have some sort of response that is kind of superficial, maybe lower hanging fruit that allows them to communicate to somebody else that they took action, and it's not quite as meaningful as it could be. So if you're going as far as to survey your workforce and ask them some really important questions, you also have to be ready to take meaningful action on those results.
Right. And two, I think it's a way for organizations to clarify confusion, because in my previous survey, the responses I got were, we were not clearly communicating some things that I thought we were clearly communicating. And it was simple as, who won the Employee of the Month award? Who won the award? And someone had mentioned that the same people always win. Well, guess what? Nobody's won more than once in the last 12 months. So,
but you've done a really good job advertising that certain people have won that award.
Yeah, so as simple as like, okay, people are still confused on a simple initiative from recognition. And so it gives companies also the way, an opportunity to clarify things if people are not really keeping up with all the communication. And
one of my favorite quotes is George Bernard Shaw saying, in effect, one of the greatest mistakes in communication is assuming that it has taken place. Just because I've said something, well, you must have heard what I said because I remember saying it. Right. Exactly. It's not until I come back to you and say, David, what did I just say? Can you sort of repeat to me? And then suddenly it's, you're connecting. We don't always have the time for that, of course. And there's some situations where that's more called for than others. But, if we never make that effort, if we never check in with people to say, what have we said or what have we not said? When you're making those assumptions, communication is often right out the window. You could have a team of 10 people moving in 10 different directions because nobody knows really what your common mission is, your common goal as an organization. And so that work is so important. And I know Stephen Covey has a ton to say, for example, on mission statements, et cetera. So it's worth checking out his content and certainly other people. But I'm glad you're doing those. And I don't doubt that you're taking action on what's coming in. David, now, if you would just stop recognizing the same people as Employee of the Month, you'd be set.
Now, if you don't have 12 employees, obviously someone has to win more than once. But
right.
When you have more than 12 people, somebody can win. You don't have the same person winning every month. So it's sometimes you just always assume, as you had said, and it's like you just need to make sure people understand what your message is supposed to be. And you can't control how they take information and process it. All you can do is try to make it so they process it better and more clearly to everybody on the team, whether it's verbally, in an email, on a dashboard, in a break room, whatever you need to get more clarity on your communication. Same with managers, right? Like if you aren't getting clear communication from your manager, that's a problem. And you probably assume you're not doing a good job, or you assume you're doing a good job. Sometimes you are blindsided, right? So it definitely goes both ways. And managers have a really important position to really communicate with their team effectively and find the right way to communicate with them on a consistent basis, keep them engaged, because if you feel like you're going to get the best of somebody every day in and day out, it's not going to be the case. And people are going to have rough days. They're going to be confused, or they're going to be not fully present. They're going to have personal things going on that don't help the situation at work. And the more that the managers can do to really improve that is going to be helpful. So Eric,
any company's greatest asset is its people, and every day those people walk out the door with no promise that they're going to come back in the next day. And so if we're not engaging them and keeping them and retaining them in one way or another, that doesn't bode well for our businesses, that's for sure.
Absolutely. You can be a great company. You can be an awesome company, and people might love the company. But, one question I always tell people in interviews, if you are interviewing, ask about the manager and what their communication style is. I never hear people ask me that, and yeah, you're going to work for a company, but who's going to be managing you, and what's their communication style? What's their manager style like? The more you can ask that up front, the more you are going to be well equipped to be successful in that role, if you know what kind of person you're going to be managed by. Because again, there are people that are managers that probably shouldn't be managers, and they just aren't very good communicators. So I highly suggest people who are interviewing currently for jobs ask those questions about the management style and the communication style. Ask those questions. Go on AI, ChatGPT, and ask, what kind of questions should I ask in an interview? Because I get just some very basic questions. I never get those about communication style. So definitely ask those questions. But Eric, anything else you want to add to our conversation before we wrap up?
I guess only that we've talked about diverse communication styles, certainly in the workplace. And also, I just want to make sure it's clear, we're also talking about our communities, our personal and professional communities. And you mentioned I'm the founder of HRHotSeat, which is entirely free, by the way. Nobody pays to be a part of it. But that's one of the things that really drives and benefits our conversations, is this cognitive diversity, where people are showing up with all kinds of experiences. We're united under a common goal or objective, which is to move forward, move the HR discipline forward and move ourselves, grow our networks, and grow our own careers within the HR discipline, broadly defined. But we very much benefit from the cognitive diversity in communication style, problem solving style, et cetera, that people bring to our discussions. And so just as you're, sort of being intentional about embracing diversity in the workplace, take a look around you wherever you happen to be. And if it's true, as it has been said, that we're the average of the 5 people around which we spend most of our time, is that a good thing? Or could you stand to be a little bit more intentional about who those 5 people are, so that you're experiencing success and fulfillment and reward in ways that you've never experienced before? So what we're talking about today goes well beyond the workplace as well.
Yeah, I love what you're doing with HRHotSeat. I think it's awesome. And so now I'm aware of it, and hopefully everybody watching is aware of it. So definitely check it out. You can scan the QR code on the screen if you are watching live, but definitely keep up the great work there, Eric. I think it's awesome. So, well, I appreciate your time. I know you are definitely moving in a few directions, and I appreciate your time today, and glad we could have this conversation. And I wish you all the best with the family and all the summer activities you have going on, because it's going to be winter before you know it, and then we're going to be complaining about the winter. So
I know it.
enjoy it while we can, right?
Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you for your time, Eric. This has been great, and hopefully we can keep in touch. But for those of you who are looking out for next episodes, I just posted one in 2 weeks coming out. A ton coming up in June, July, August, and so on. But definitely tune in to future episodes with awesome, great guests that we have, just like Eric. So, Eric, thanks a lot for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, David. I've really enjoyed it.
Take care, everybody.